Hello, I'm Matt Reardon. Thanks for watching the September 13th Wednesday evening West Weather Update brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Starting out here, we're actually looking at a radar imagery of yesterday, really Tuesday evening, and I'm pulling that up because I know it's kind of a bigger shot of the southwestern U.S., but if you look closely, there is a strong thunderstorm in here, a number of thunderstorms across central Arizona. Singling out this one because in the evening hours, this pushed through the Phoenix metro area. A number of storm reports associated with this one, particularly strong winds here. As I play this forward in through the overnight last night, you can see a lot of these thunderstorm, the complexes here pushing through parts of eastern Arizona, ultimately through parts of New Mexico, kind of pushing out through the area in here this morning. And then in the afternoon, but you'll notice in the afternoon, it's like a Christmas tree. We light up with that more, which we'll call typical monsoon activity here in the middle of September. But we did get a powerful thunderstorm through central Arizona last night, number of storm reports associated with that. If we jump over and look at the Storm Prediction Center reports from yesterday, September 12th, you can see a pocket of them right in that Phoenix metro area. It looked like an airfield, had a number of planes tossed associated with this, saw some trees down, saw some cactuses down. This can happen, in these monsoonal thunderstorms. This one occurring in the evening and overnight hours. But typically Storm Prediction Center, if you're looking at a map like this, you're looking something more in the eastern U.S., maybe in Oklahoma, Arkansas, something moving through Mississippi. But then it's kind of monsoonal time period. We can get some of these storm reports over here in the western U.S. Certainly saw that last night. Jump you back, looking at the current satellite imagery across the southwest U.S., we talked about how we did see that more typical monsoon activity spring up across the, we'll say the higher elevations here in the western U.S., so parts of Nevada, Utah, Colorado, northeast, and eastern Arizona. Can't rule out a stronger storm sneaking back into the valley area here this evening, but I don't think quite to the same strength that we saw yesterday. This was more associated with an upper level shortwave trough that we saw pushing through the area. You can actually see the increased cloud shields associated with that as that has now moved out of the area in wake of that more typical monsoonal activity and the lee wake behind that. If I take a bigger picture here, jumping out, looking at down on the eastern Pacific here. So here's Hawaii hiding in here amongst the clouds. Here's North America, the western U.S. There are a few things I think just kind of starting here that I want to talk about, not only for the forecast as we get to the end of this week, we'll talk about that, but even kind of jumping the gun a bit and looking out into the end of next week. And there's even some things we can see right away here on Wednesday evening that I think could impact the forecast all the way out, not only 7 days from now, but potentially 8, 9, and 10. Typically, if you watch these videos, we'll talk about the 7-day forecast. Then the crystal ball gets cloudy, right, as you get into the forecast beyond that. But some things are kind of coming together here, and I'll walk you through it here. For starters, there is this spin in the atmosphere here. It's pretty small, but you can see this cloud shield here, these low clouds over the ocean. You can make out a weak spin here. Believe it or not, this was Hurricane Hova, the very, very powerful Category 5 storm we were tracking, exactly 7 days ago today. It has weakened. That was the expectation as it went over some cooler ocean waters. Now just kind of a skeleton or a ghost of it once was. Really not many showers associated with this. This will continue moving to the west, but it's so weak right now. Likely really kind of a non-thing for Hawaii going forward. That is good news, certainly. If we look to the southeast of that, we do see a more robust pocket of tropical thunderstorms. Now, we've watched these, it feels like, the whole hurricane season starting maybe in June, July, August, now into September, for potential development, and that's what we're watching right here. And if you look closely at that cloud field, some of the thunderstorm complexes in there, you can kind of make out that counterclockwise rotation we watch for potential development. It's very weak, it's hard to see, but there is something of a spin here. As a result of that, the National Hurricane Center has identified that area for potential development going in to this weekend. Now, I like this plot here from a colleague, Tomer Berg. Highlighted underneath that area of interest here is those ocean temperatures. And we've talked about this all year in the Eastern Pacific. We had these powerful storms develop here in the very warm waters of the Eastern Pacific. We had Dora, major hurricane, had Hillary, just recently had Hova, major hurricane, really kind of situated in these warmer waters here. But as they sneak out of that further to the north or the northwest, just as we saw with so many of these, we see that predictable weakening. And the good news here for any potential development out of this system is it's likely to track northwest. If it tries to get toward Hawaii, it's going to impact or go over these colder ocean temperatures, and we'd expect pretty quick weakening as a result of that. I'll jump out here. This is looking at the ECMWF forecast. We're taking a look at the Central Pacific here. Here's Hawaii down in here. This is that potential development we were keeping an eye on. Make this valid as of this evening. You can see even a low pressure system popping up in here on the graph, indicative of that kind of weak spin we were just keeping an eye on. But as I take this forecast through the evening into Thursday, now into Friday, deepening some, but not much really at all here as it moves to the north. Maybe some more robust thunderstorm development surrounding the storm, but don't see a big deep low that we'd expect from, say, a tropical storm or Category 1 hurricane. As I take this forward, if anything, it weakens quickly after that into Sunday evening. The system likely to experience some upper level shear on top of the cooler ocean waters that it's flowing over. So not expecting much strengthening from this. A number of different models paint a very similar story that this is likely, if it develops at all this weekend into a tropical depression or even a tropical storm, likely to weaken pretty quickly thereafter that into the next week. Potentially, given its current trajectory, the remnants of that could push over the state and the islands of Hawaii. Really is some increased shower activity potentially, or even some gusty winds. There's a volcano here that's picked up some activity in recent days too. So kind of a combination of different weather and geology systems there, but not expecting a big impact at this time other than some rainfall and some wind. I want to jump back at that original satellite picture I was showing you earlier here, if I can find it. There are a few other things I want to talk about. I talked about potentially looking out into the 7-day to 8-day forecast. If we look way up toward the north near Alaska on this chart, there's this upper level low, actually the surface low pressure system associated with here, way in the North Pacific. And if you look at the cloud shield surrounding that upper level low, I'm really kind of watching these clouds racing toward the northeast here. That's actually indicative of the jet stream flowing over that same area. And if you look closely at the cloud shield here, really across that whole area, even into the coast of Canada, you can see that fast jet stream level winds pushing up into British Columbia, now coming back over North America. Well, I just drew, that's an upper level ridge in the atmosphere. Those are typically associated with heat at the surface beneath them, and that kind of helps us formulate the forecast going forward. So this upper level ridge is trying to push over the Pacific Northwest, getting toward this weekend. So expecting some heat associated with that. I am keeping an eye on that upper level trough though, on that low pressure system here. I think it's going to play a role when we get into the forecast next week, because it has its eye on the western US, and there's going to be some rainfall, certainly temperature implications with that. The last thing I wanted to point out on this map, it's actually invisible, or at least not clear to us looking at this map, and it's an upper level low centered in the eastern Pacific here, and it's kind of situated right in here, and you can't really see much. And it's why we often use this product. You've probably seen me use it looking at water vapor in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And I'm just going to go over, I'll show you on this site here. We're looking at the visible imagery here in the eastern Pacific. These are clouds, we can see with our own eyes. But if we look at the water vapor, which is a different product here, gives us an idea of where that moisture is in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Sometimes that allows us to pick up some things that we literally can't see, maybe are invisible on that visible imagery I just showed you. And now we can make out this upper level low that's situated here underneath this ridge pushing into British Columbia in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm keeping an eye on this upper level low, because if you watch it carefully, it's slowly inching its way toward the western US. Now, it's not particularly strong right now, not one of these big strong lows that we see come through maybe in the winter or during the water year, but it does have some implications for the forecast next week, and we'll take a look at that as we jump over and look at the ECMWF forecast for that time period. This is looking at the upper level height map. This is kind of paint the picture that I just showed you earlier. There's that upper level ridge that showed you trying to push into British Columbia in the Pacific Northwest, the upper level trough and that low pressure system associated with that here just south of Alaska in the Gulf of Alaska here. Can't really even make out the upper level low, but it will get a little bit more amplified as I take this through the forecast here. So take this into Thursday, and then in the Friday, there's that upper level low coming a little bit more clear now in the eastern Pacific, trying to push toward California. We have this very strong upper level trough pushing in the wake of that ridge, which now getting into Friday afternoon is situated over Washington, Oregon, Idaho. So this is kind of a hint to us that tomorrow, Thursday, daytime highs probably warming up a bit in the Pacific Northwest, probably warming up even more on Friday. As I take this forward into Saturday, and then into Sunday, still see that ridging kind of dominating over the western U.S. This upper level troughing here situated off the coast of California. Might be bringing in some onshore flow to the coastal communities of California. Can't rule out, some fog getting pushed inland, maybe some misty showers, nothing too significant. But the bigger story, I think, is getting into next week as this upper level low kind of pushes more toward British Columbia here. And getting into mid next week, we're actually going to see a kind of a phasing or a conjoining of the upper level low here and the subtropical upper level low here trying to push into California. And as I take this Tuesday into Wednesday, this upper level low pushes down into the Pacific Northwest, bringing temperatures down, likely rainfall into the Pacific Northwest, the Willamette Valley, parts of Washington. It also begins to kind of yank on that subtropical low, now pulling that up into the western U.S., likely this making what I'll call landfall somewhere in Southern California here, looking out into Wednesday, September 20th. And ultimately, getting cut off here and spinning over the western U.S., getting late into next week, talking Thursday afternoon, all the way out into September 21st. Now, I typically don't show forecasts quite this far, but we're seeing some agreement not only from the ECMWF model here, but the ensembles and the GFS, that upper level low that I showed you earlier, trying to push into the North Pacific, into the British Columbia here this weekend, and then ultimately into the western U.S. sometime mid next week is likely to happen. It might not play out exactly like I showed you here. You can never be too confident in a 7 to 9 day forecast. But we are expecting cooler temperature chances in the middle and the late part of next week, and potentially some robust precipitation chances moving into some areas here that haven't had a lot of precip of late. Just kind of picking on the ECMWF model here, I'll make this valid Wednesday evening. See some of those monsoonal showers and thunderstorms that we were just talking about here over parts of the upper elevations here in the southwest. Not too much of that continuing really as a result of that subtropical jet stream picking up a little bit Friday into Saturday. So we don't see a ton of that activity now Friday afternoon across the desert southwest. Getting into Saturday, don't see a ton of it either. Not much really precipitation to talk about across the whole western U.S. at this time. Part of that is we don't have a huge system coming through, not till kind of mid to late in the week next week. We do have that upper level low spinning here off California, but it's kind of on the weaker side, not a lot of moisture associated with it. But all the way now into Tuesday the 19th, and then finally Wednesday morning, expecting some shower activity to finally push in associated with that upper level low, pushing into parts of Oregon, Washington. Thursday, I showed you, kind of pulls in that subtropical low over Southern California. Perhaps some showers expected here along coastal Southern California communities getting out into Thursday and Friday of next week. And that kind of sits and parks, at least on this ECMWF model, over Oregon. And that's going to keep flow kind of oriented over Idaho, parts of Montana. Rain showers possible here Thursday afternoon in the Willamette Valley as well. You can see some showers trying to push into central Idaho, parts of far western Montana, parts of central Montana. And this kind of low spins over the area here over Friday and then into Saturday. Could even see some heavier rain pushing in here to far western Montana. The Golden Triangle in here actually has seen some drought development lately associated with kind of this Pacific Northwest drought. So not a bad thing to see them get some precipitation here with the soils drying out in that area here. Now, I've taken this all the way out. Now we're looking at September 23rd. This is officially a 10-day forecast. You can never be too sure with forecasts out this far, but I am expecting more rain, more cooler weather at the end of the next week. The specific details on that can't be ironed out in a 7 to 10 day forecast, but this area in general, expecting some more precipitation. If we look at the 7-day totals from the ECMWF, see some significant totals here in the Willamette Valley. Again, kind of at the end of that forecast, some significant totals pushing into western Montana. Nothing, at least in this forecast here, concerning from a flooding sense. That's hard to get into when you look out that far, but the potential is there for some heavier rainfall. The Palouse here in eastern Washington, some higher values there pushing toward an inch, maybe even over, if this model is to be believed. If I jump over here, get another opinion perhaps from the GFS model, pull up the temperature, or the precipitation, I should say, those 10-day totals here. We'll look at the 7-day totals, and then we'll just take that out to the end of next week, the 24th. And again, you can see some precipitation moving into Oregon, something closer to a half to an inch here for parts of western and eastern Oregon, a bit higher than that in parts of western Montana and Idaho. So a few of these models now coming into agreement that systems are likely to be pushing through at the end of next week associated with those different players we saw earlier coming together in the Pacific Ocean. Now, another piece to this is the temperatures. Not seeing very high temperatures today, but remember that upper level ridge is trying to work over the Pacific Northwest, getting into Thursday afternoon. Just looking at the NDFD, these are really the National Weather Service high temperature forecast. We see temperatures increase compared to today across the Pacific Northwest, even parts of the Sacramento Valley. And then into Friday, almost summer-like temperatures now pushing into the Snake River Valley, parts of eastern Washington, parts of the Willamette, looking at low 90s now. Getting into Saturday, warm temperatures continue, but starting to back down a little bit. It's in the Pacific Northwest. Then into Sunday, and really that cool down Monday as that upper level trough tries to start to push into the area. Tuesday, even cooler, now looking at more fall-like temperatures across the area, talking low 90s even in parts of the desert southwest. So a big change in temperatures as we get into next week, with that precipitation likely moving into the Pacific Northwest sometime early Wednesday, maybe even Tuesday night, spinning up over the area, and chances beginning in Idaho, Montana quickly after that toward the end of the week. Again, specifics hard to say that far out, but we do have some agreement there on the models. If we want to look even beyond that, we're looking out pretty far already, but I'll look at the ECMWF ensemble jet stream forecast to get an idea of what we might be looking at even out toward not this weekend, but next weekend and beyond. I'll make this valid here as of Thursday, September 22nd. And at least initially what we see here is not something totally dissimilar from your typical El Nino style jet stream. We have this subtropical jet stream pushing through the desert southwest. We've talked about that Hawaii to San Diego connection. This is one of the reasons that we're expecting the monsoon to weaken a bit, looking out into that 7 to 10 day forecast with that upper level flow disrupting that monsoonal circulation. But what I've kind of been watching for and what I've been worried about this year from a typical kind of El Nino pattern is this subtropical jet stream pushing through the desert southwest, but then a big upper level ridge pushing over British Columbia. Now, kind of going out through the next few days, we see that, but it's very brief. It quickly gets kind of taken over by the upper level troughing and the low pressure system that moves in middle to late next week. But if I take this forecast out even into Friday and then Saturday, September 23rd, we see that subtropical jet stream component there. That's pretty clear on this forecast, but we don't see a big kind of upper level ridge over British Columbia. If anything, I still see the jet stream kind of focused on the Pacific Northwest area. Not the strongest, but enough perhaps to keep rainfall chances around, enough to keep temperatures lower, to not at least exacerbate the drought that's built into this area, and maybe even walk it back a bit if some of these rainfall chances materialize, which I think they will, at least in some way. Again, the specific amounts, hard to predict that far out. So kind of good news here is even if I take this further, you can't put too much weight into this getting even beyond 10 days, but we don't see a big signal that we're going to have this big upper level ridge over British Columbia, Washington, Idaho, Montana right now. We still see that subtropical jet component, but don't see that kind of typically equated ridging. And if I jump over and look at a different model here, the GFS ensemble, again, Monday, September 25th, kind of that 10 to 12 day mark, there's that subtropical jet over the southwestern US, but we don't see the big ridge there over British Columbia. Again, that jet stream trying to come onshore somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, keeping rain chances around for that area. If we look out over the Climate Prediction Center, their kind of take on things, make this a little bigger so we can see what's going on here. Their 6 to 10 day forecast, not a surprise to see colder temperatures here, looking out into the work week. Next week, expecting temperatures down across the board. I talked about highs in the 90s in the lower Colorado River Valley, how much of a change that was from some of the July and August heat that we saw. If you look at precipitation over that same time period, again, kind of looking out into next work week, they do have this below average kind of designation here for the Willamette Valley parts of Western Oregon. Not in total agreement there. I think we do get some significant precip kind of pushing in here. Whether it skips out in the Willamette Valley in terms of those more kind of half inch to inch totals, hard to say, but I think good chance that areas in here do get some sort of rainfall at the end of the work week next week. If we look out to the 8 to 14 day time period, kind of getting into that weekend out next week, we do see those precipitation chances return to the Willamette Valley and the Pacific Northwest. Again, as that jet stream continues to focus on the Pacific Northwest, we don't have a big ridge out west, and so we don't see a lot of heat in that forecast either. The heat kind of centered over the upper Midwest in that same time period, really kind of getting out into the end of September. I think, depending on where exactly we are in the year, that can be good news or bad news, at least specifically for drought and soils drying out. It's not bad news. Parts of the Golden Triangle, I mentioned earlier, dealing with some drought developing here recently, expecting some precipitation to move into here associated with that low pressure system that we talked about. The Willamette Valley here has seen some rain recently, walked back a little bit of the drought, potentially more coming in at the end of next week. Unfortunately, depending on where you're at for the monsoon season this year, parts of the higher elevation monsoon seeing a weakness in that monsoon going forward, and that's really a result of that upper level subtropical jet stream pushing through the area that tends to weaken that circulation that we expect this time of year. That is all I have for you all this evening. Thank you for watching. See you next week.